Good evening and welcome to the Vigilate Dialogues. I am your host, Shayna Smith Archer, welcoming you to another episode of the Dialogue. With me today, I have some very dynamic ladies, and we're going to be talking about a very important topic. I felt that in light of Domestic Violence Month, well, along with a lot of other awareness, I saw, I think, promo for Anti-Bullying Week that tonight we're going to talk about when relationships go bad and the whole gamut of violence against women and a whole bunch of stuff I tossed at them. So I hope these ladies are ready to have a very informative and interesting conversation. So I don't think there are any strangers, but I'm going to have them introduce themselves and we're going to get started. So, Doc, go right ahead.
Oh, that's me or Maris?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm Dr. Samuel. I'm June Samuel. I'm a psychiatrist here in the BVI. I do the majority of my work is with adult clients. I do see some children, and I do a broad spectrum of work. So this area that we're talking about tonight, we are very familiar because we do see persons probably more often than we would like to admit, where these are the concerns that come up in the sessions. So thank you for having us, Shayna, on Vigilante Dialogues. Welcome back.
Yes.
Back.
Good to be back, right? And I think this might be Maris's first time on this show. So welcome to the National Boardroom.
Yes, it is. I've never been on your show before. So this is a first time for me.
Yes. We've had persons from the Family Support Network before, but just let persons know again who you are and where you're representing tonight.
Okay, I am representing Family Support Network. I have been there for the last year and a little bit. I have been on the board for years, but just recently as in a counseling position or as a clinician. I'm a psychologist. I've been doing this for like some 35 years now. So that tells how old I am. And I guess I'm in a really good place to talk about domestic violence because of where I work and the clients that we see. So I'm happy to be here, and I hope that I can shed some light on what's happening in the BVI and perhaps internationally with domestic violence.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, in doing my research, Doc, I came across with a poster that said violence against women is a human rights violation. I was like, yeah, this really is taking it to another level in terms of figuring out and understanding how much of an issue this is. And it was saying that, it's not a women's issue, but it's everybody's problem to address. And I think that's definitely one of the things where we want to focus on. Again, it's about family being the bedrock of any society, and having healthy family relationships is always one of those keystones in terms of prosperity, because it's no discriminator, whether you're high in the social class or low income, it doesn't matter. It can affect, and it does affect everybody. So it's something that I think we need to continuously look at, not just when we have awareness once a year, but to always have these ongoing conversations so that we can truly have more healthy relationships, I would say, in our society, and look at the different aspects. So tonight we're going to kind of unpack this. I don't know if we're going to get through the whole thing. We may just end up with a part 2, but we'll see how it goes. But I think you guys are well versed in terms of being able to start off with helping us understand. Let's start off with first, what is it we're striving for when we say healthy relationships? What is it that we're looking for? Any one of you?
Well, I mean, I think so it's a good conversation. It's a critical conversation, I would say, at this point. In our lifetime, or where we're at just generally in the world, because of all the different stresses that are happening. And as you say, the family is the bedrock, and relationships are at the center of families. So there are just so many different dynamics that are going on. And I think a lot of us are struggling with, maintaining healthy relationships all around. And, healthy relationships are basically, we're looking for relationships in which there's respect on all sides, relationships in which there is good communication, um, relationships where persons are supportive of each other's, goals, aspirations. There are different types of relationships. So in intimate relationships and clearly relationships where, persons are married or in long-term relationships really want to be supportive of your partner and looking to really grow the relationship from one stage to the next. People change, changes happen, both in life and changes that individuals go through. And healthy relationships have to make it through all of those changes that individuals may experience. So that's my take on it. I'm sure Maris, you add some stuff to that in terms of what else you're
Well,
looking
I
for.
mean, I would say that a healthy relationship is a healthy relationship. If you have, if you support one another, if you are there to I guess to me, I look at it at that two people are there to help each other through life, whether we're girlfriends or we're husbands and wives or whatever.
Yeah.
You're there
Mm-hmm.
to help each other through life, not to pull each other down. And once you get into communication, being able to talk to each other, I think a lot of relationships, people are intimate but they're not friends,
Mm-hmm.
or they're they're friends, maybe they're not intimate, or but there has to be communication, there has to be support,
Yeah,
there has
yeah,
to be a willingness to accept the other person's negative points as well as their positive points.
yeah.
I'm not talking
Mhm.
about abuse, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about knowing. I think people get into relationships and they're in love, but they don't understand that it's not the love that's going to keep you together, it's the ability to live with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you
Mhm.
don't understand that person and you can't live with that person or that person's personality, then you might as well throw the love out the window because it's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Is that one
So
last?
a
Right.
Mm-hmm.
healthy relationship is one where you can understand the other person and empathize with their weaknesses and
Mm-hmm.
encourage them, and you're mutually supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And I think part of what is important for all of us to realize, to Shayna, is that we're interdependent as human beings.
Okay.
And for those of us who believe in God, God intentionally placed Eve in the garden because he recognized that Adam by himself really, it wasn't going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
as you look through humanity, through human development, we depend on each other. We can't survive in this bubble by ourselves.
Yeah.
So relationships, once we recognize that, I need you, you need me, your success is my success, and then it expands outward into the community, then, health within that whole circle will be supportive, right? And it will be respectful and all of the other things that we just mentioned.
Okay. And I think that's so key in terms of what you said, that, and it showed itself during the pandemic, eh? Because, when we had to
Absolutely.
physical distance and not be able to interact with, your friends and your families, it was really hard for a lot of people because we realized
Mhm.
Yeah.
that we're basically built for relationship. Even the
Yes.
most introverted of us, we want to
Yes.
be able to
Yeah.
engage and have that close contact. And if you're a community like ours in our culture, everybody wants to be hugging and kissing.
Right.
It
Right.
made it even harder. So it's like after a while, you even miss that physical touch,
Right.
as
Yeah.
part of
Right.
your engagement and everything. So I think for the most part, again, too, in terms of what you guys saying is like, again, it's something where human interaction is part of who we are and how we're built, and having
Mhm.
healthy boundaries and the respect and empathy. I like that. Mary's brought that up. You know, we're able to relate and connect to each other much more, and making sure that we do have healthy relationships, whether it's at home, at work, even in our community. You know, wherever we find ourselves, that's key. So as
Yeah.
far as it goes, Dr. Samuel, I don't know if you were able to get some statistics to
No, but I think
no?
Mary's brought some stats.
Okay. So
I
Maris, you have
brought
some
some
stats.
from FSN.
Okay.
I'm trying to find my pad that I had them on, but I
Mhm.
seem to have misplaced it. So let me talk out of my
Okay.
head from what I do know. On the average, in a month, I'd say we might see, let's say, 7 persons coming in for protection orders.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of times we talk about women getting protection orders, but there are men getting protection orders too. And they're valid protection. I mean, they're valid reasons why they get them too. So
Hmm.
we're seeing a lot of protection orders. Um, we see, I think, more women come for counseling than men do for domestic violence. Men will come once, but they're embarrassed. They don't like to talk about the fact that things are doing to them. So you might see them one time, and then they think, like,
You know,
you see them on the street and they're kind of cow because they don't want to admit that this is really going on. Um,
Yeah.
we will see, we on the average in a month we will see maybe 17 people coming for counseling, but the
Hmm.
majority of the people who come for counseling are women. Some
Okay.
will bring their children.
Hmm.
Housing, we do maybe a year. We might have to put up like 15 women for protective
mhm,
housing.
Okay. Okay.
mhm.
Um, but that's looking at it. But on a monthly basis, I would say new clients, we get maybe 3 or 4 new clients every month. That is not saying that these are the only people that are suffering
Yeah.
from domestic violence. These are
Yeah.
the ones, they'll go to the police station, they'll report, and the police will refer them to FSN, and we don't see them.
Okay.
So maybe the 8 that the referral will see 3, and
Okay.
if it's a
Okay.
lucky month, we'll see 5. Yeah.
Yeah. See the others. So what is it though in terms of what's driving it? Based on your experience with the different cases that we have out there that we're seeing.
There's a lot of issues right now. I think one of the issues is stress. The
Hmm.
pandemic has caused a lot of people to be unemployed. Money is
Displacement.
scarce,
Hmm.
and when money is scarce, a lot of men feel that it's their job to be the breadwinner and the head of the household. When they can't do that and they can't do it properly,
Mhm.
then they become angry and they get stressed out. And what they do is they begin to attack the person that they're with. They lash out at the
Okay.
person that they're with. So you
Hmm.
find a lot of stressors in terms of, because of the economic situation right now. Um, some people just have low self-esteem, and they cannot survive unless they break the other person down. So
Hmm.
it doesn't always have to do with the stressors. There's some people that are just going to be abusive because they can't stand to see somebody else shine, and because they don't feel good about themselves, they have to break that other person down. So abuse is about a lot of things. It's about control, it's about power, it's about
Hmm.
gaining your own power because you don't feel like you have any. So you use the other person to show that you have power. There are a lot of things that cause abuse. But
That
those,
come
those are
across.
just some of the things. I'll let June talk about the rest.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the thing too is that you look at what we call this cycle of violence, and so some of this is rooted in um, where we come from, what our experiences have been, whether it's as a child in our own homes, what we experienced there. So we may have been exposed to violence in the homes, alcohol and abuse,
Hmm.
and just domestic violence itself,
Yeah.
and having not received any intervention, then you grow up and you become then an abuser yourself, right? So there's a whole cycle. And then of course there's, as Maris mentioned, the stressors, but then they're the persons who have, you know, other underlying kinds of issues. So the substance abusers, alcohol being, you know, very common in terms of that
Mm-hmm.
picture, and behaviors associated with that. There may be persons who have personality disorders, mental health disorders, and become violent, you know, as a part of that picture.
Okay.
So then there are other things, you know, the bullying that happens, children who
Yep.
get bullied and teased, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a lot of anger that they walk around with, and you know, the sexual assault, that persons endure, and other kinds of assaults. So there's so many different factors, as Maris mentioned, that can contribute. But
Uh-huh.
basically, you know, what's happening is persons are going to be exhibiting these behaviors where there hasn't been intervention before, and there are additional stressors on top of that, so it becomes the default behavior that that
Oh,
that
okay.
persons enter into.
So you touched on you touched on the bullying. I know that's one form of violence that we like, sometimes we it's become a thing now because it really got, I would say, in the last few years, especially the cyberbullying. Because I mean, when we went to school, we know how it was. People would say we're teasing other kids.
The teasing, yes, you get
Yes,
teased in
and
school.
you know, we think that it's harmless. No, but this is a thing now where you know you reflect on these things and you realize these things weren't good things to do at the time because you know it was affecting the other person's self esteem because you know they were made to feel less than for whatever reason, maybe something that they did, but you know it stays with them basically, and when they become an adult now, sometimes the bully become the bullier, and then you have
Mm.
adults
Yep.
bullying other adults, whether it's in the workplace or you know again in the community or whatever the case is that something that we see commonly but we just haven't named it?
Well,
I
what I
think
would say.
bullying.
Mm,
Go ahead, Drew. When you're
go ahead,
finished.
Mary. Go ahead,
Oh, I
Mary.
was going to say that. I think that bullying has always been. I mean, we joke about it and say it's teasing. When
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
was a
right.
child, they teased you, and
Mm-hmm.
adults do the same thing. But it's in a way when it's degrading the other person, and it's
Yeah.
making the other person feel badly about
Shame.
themselves. Then
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's bullying, and
Okay.
we have a lot of it. I mean, among adults, I listen to men sometimes talk to each other, and
Mm-hmm.
wow, they're the biggest bullies against each other. If you listen to the things that they say to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and they say it jokingly, but the old people used to say there's a little bit of truth in all the jokes that you mean
Yeah.
it. So, and I wonder sometimes how the person who receives it
It receives
feels
it. Yeah.
when they
Mm-hmm.
hear it. And
Yeah.
elementary school, I mean, it starts from very young.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Little kids,
Mm-hmm.
if the one, every child thinks that they're perfect when they're at home with mommy and daddy until they go to kindergarten. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they found out they have cross eyes and they have buck teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or that they're pigeon toed, or that they're
Yeah.
fat, or
Yeah.
all of a sudden things you learn that your hair is really hard. You learn that something is wrong with you because and now you're
Mm-hmm.
being judged by your peers. And
Yeah.
for some reason, our peers at that age, they don't point out, that you're pretty. They point out what's off.
Your
What's
flaws.
wrong? Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Your self-esteem begins to be affected, and that's how bullying starts. A lot of times, yes, parents are at home and they make the way they talk to their children. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see kids who grow up in houses where parents talk to them, not talk at them. They're
Mm-hmm.
kids who grow up in homes where no one ever talks to them, they just talk at them. They yell at them. So that child goes to school and they become
And
the
they
ones
act
that,
out. Yeah.
yeah, they act out. They do the same things the parents do at home to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that I was looking when I was looking up bullying and doing some research on bullying recently, they were saying that a lot of the people who get into bullying, most of the people who get into bullying are, it's like they're all suffering from this post traumatic thing that has happened. There's some event that happens. They said even if it's their parents yell at them, they don't necessarily always do it. But when they feel uncomfortable about
Mm-hmm.
themselves
Mm-hmm.
and like something has pre kind of precursor that, so that they get to
Yeah.
that point where it's like now they have to they become angry, so they start pushing out and they push
Mm-hmm.
out at other people and they start
So they
bullying
get
other people
defensive.
because they can't deal with the
Okay.
emotions that they're feeling.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the bullying again has to do with how people feel about themselves, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you don't have that safe environment at home, it's going to be difficult going out in the community and being able to be functional at that young age, especially when it is you're just starting to experience the world and trying to understand yourself where your place is in everything that's happening. So, Doc, in your practice, are you seeing a lot of clients that are dealing with, I guess, traumatic events that stem from bullying, or is it not as at least to that extreme?
Well, it so there's a kind of a generational divide here, I find.
Mm-hmm.
And so for adults or my age, a little bit older, they don't necessarily have the perception or conceptualize it as bullying, but you can, if you question and go back, you can detect where in their socialization there may have been instances of what we would now call bullying, but a lot of shaming,
Mm-hmm.
um, and negative interactions, basically in communications within families, which I think that there was a Mariska, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we've evolved over time, because there would have been a time when you think it's okay to just shout at people in the household, and you say things that are not the nicest things, all in an effort to try to
Mm-hmm.
make people behave in a way that you want them to behave.
Yeah.
And what is not taken into account is that you have different types of personalities, and so different persons within a household will be affected differently by seeing,
Differently, yeah.
being exposed to
The
the same
same
event.
event. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for some persons, it remains with them, their self esteem is not good. And then, as they grow up and have relationships and other kinds of friendships, you see how, the behaviors, they either allow themselves to be taken advantage of, there are no boundaries, so there's fallouts in relationships as they grow up to be an
Yeah.
adult. And often you can trace it back to, some of those experiences they've had as a child. When I'm
Yeah.
dealing with children, you now, because we're calling it bullying, so they can identify the instances where they're
Okay.
having those experiences on the playground, social media,
Mm-hmm.
and what's happening on social media is a big thing with the
Yeah.
children. Okay. And the types of conversations. So it's not necessarily happening face to face, but happening within that space.
In that virtual
So
environment. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yep.
it's different in different age groups, I find, in terms
Yeah.
of how it's seen.
Where we see it.
And
Okay.
the other thing too is that this, it gets into our workplaces, and hopefully we'll be talking about the workplace bullying that happens, um, and how persons are affected in workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay. Maris, you wanted to add to that? So
No, I'm glad she brought up workplace bullying because there's a lot of it that goes on in our
in our
on the job
community.
here
Yeah.
in our community a lot.
Mm-hmm.
People, I know people who tell me that they, when it comes time to go to work every day, I've had clients who tell me their stomach literally gets affected. Before they leave their house, they have diarrhea because they are so anxious about what is going to happen when they go to work. And that's a horrible, horrible thing to have to experience when you're going to work, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't even think the people that are doing it realize that they're bullying or that they're really affecting the other person.
Yeah. And sometimes it tends to, sometimes it's authority figures, I realize, and other times it's your peers in the workplace that create that type of stress, and make people basically uncomfortable when it comes to going to work. But we're gonna touch on some of the solutions. But again, I want to unpack. So another one for me that I realized, because I was starting to be like, oh Lord, we have a very violent community. One that's not talked about a lot, and I know of stories from when I was working in the public service and even in the private sector now. Sexual harassment. I know we see it on TV and we tend to, we were down here cheering for the Me Too movement. But I think that this is definitely one that's unreported or underreported when it comes to, again, violence in the workplace. And sexual harassment could be both men and women, just so everybody knows that sometimes men do get harassed, but we tend to see it more with females being harassed by men. What are you guys seeing out there with that?
I think what we at FSNC sometimes is that women who may be hired in places like bars or restaurants, sometimes even as housekeepers, that sometimes the employers see them as if they hire them with the intention of this person is going to be, my lover or something, they're going to have, and the person goes in sometimes innocent, thinking, okay, this is a job. This is my job. I'm going to go be a waitress. I'm going to go work in a bar and I'm going home at the end of the night. Yeah. And their expectations that they haven't. So I think in that sense, you might see some sexual harassment. I haven't had too many people who came and said, this happened on their job in terms of working in an office, but I'm sure it happens. I think sometimes people are embarrassed to report so they don't come out. But I've had a lot of women who are from other countries who come here and they get a job working in a bar, and it's late at night and they're trying to get home. They don't drive, and bosses who think that, if I give you a ride home, then you have to give me favors or, pretty much, that kind of stuff.
That kind of behavior. Okay.
Yeah.
I think part of why we may not be hearing a lot about it has to do with the whole awareness part of it, and helping, because what I find is that we have like a lot of boundary violations, where persons get into your space inappropriately, and sometimes there may not be that awareness, I think, that it is inappropriate, and you're basically bordering on being sexually inappropriate as well, right? In terms of contact and some of the conversations that you may be trying to have. But I agree with Maris that it's not something that comes to the forefront often. But sometimes in observations you can see where there are violations happening, and persons just I think to a certain extent, I think sometimes we're a little bit desensitized to stuff like this, particularly this area.
And I think it's because it's something where sometimes the comments are made, and because you think this is your coworker, it's just a lighthearted something. But we're not taking it seriously. So there's a lot of education and awareness, I think, has to come into play with that.
That needs to happen.
Okay. All right. And I guess the last one, which I guess it ties into the party in terms of domestic, what we would refer to as domestic violence, but rape is another violence against women. that we see, and I'm sure this one is again
Mhm.
unreported or underreported because of shame that is brought about, against the
Mhm.
victim, oftentimes blaming them for whatever it is that's happened when that's not the case. So what do we have going on here? What-
Well, FSN, I would say this. I would almost dare to say that 95% of the women that we see who
Mhm,
come in for domestic violence were rape victims, whether as children or as adults. And
mhm,
there is a high percentage of young girls being raped by family members, by people in the village,
Yeah.
by, step parents, sometimes by their own parents who have been
mhm,
molested and raped as children.
mhm.
I mean, you can almost uh, every other, not every other, every three
Yeah.
clients that come in for counseling and that are female. Some of the
Mhm,
males too report having been molested as children
mhm.
and being raped. So there's a high percentage that's not reported.
Yeah.
And the scary thing is that a lot of the women who come in told their partners what happened, and then the partners turn and victimize them because of it.
Mm.
So it's like almost a catch
Yeah, vicious
22
cycle that they
situation for
fall in.
women
Hmm.
because you can't. Here you're looking for support, and instead of getting support, you become victimized because you reported it to somebody.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's really it's a horrible situation here in the BVI, and the women that we're
Yeah.
seeing for Caribbean women. I
Yeah.
dare to say that a lot of Caribbean women are carrying around this
That trauma.
weight on their shoulders that they've never reported, they've
Yeah.
never told anyone. And then when they find somebody that they think, okay, this is going to be my life partner, so I trust this person and I tell them, then that person uses it against them. So
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
it's
victimized again. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. The sexual assault of girls and women
Hmm.
Mhm.
is an issue that needs some attention in a um, in an almost an aggressive way, because we know that so there's a study that was done in the US, the Kaiser Foundation, that completed this study that looked at adverse childhood events. And what came out of that study is that, for example, children who have three or more adverse childhood events will grow up to be adults who are at risk for developing either physical or mental health issues, right?
Hmm.
And in there is the sexual assault and the physical abuse, right? Now, so one of the things that I've been doing, more recently, is every patient that comes to me, I do the screening,
Okay.
and it has been quite an eye opener.
Mm.
The number of persons who
Mhm.
would have experienced some sort of sexual assault in childhood or during their early adulthood.
Yeah.
Right? And as Mary said, it is, I think it is one of those things that all Caribbean women, and I know women in the BVI, that we it's we carry it secretly. We
Hmm.
carry that secret. Um, there's a lot about our systems that doesn't support women reporting or reaching out for help.
Hmm.
Okay, there are a lot of socio-economic factors that have to do with women in relationships. I think that sometimes you know it's just not something that they necessarily want to have to deal with,
Yeah.
right? And then for the persons who do report and who do step forward, um, the stigma and the
Yeah.
shame and
That comes with it. Hmm.
the comments that they have to deal with,
Yes, for sure.
the
Yes. Mhm.
attitudes from those in authority or even those within the systems that should be bringing them justice. I mean, it is a lot, especially if you're a child,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
a young adult.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
our systems, for me, from where I sit, does not support, women talking about and coming forward to report when they've been assaulted. And sexual assault, in childhood and early adulthood, Mary would tell you,
Yeah.
carries a significant psychological um, distress.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And those children grow
Mhm.
up into adults who continue to struggle. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
this impacts on their relationships, their intimate relationships.
Yeah.
You know, so that is a area of significant concern. I think that needs to be addressed. Pornography and child pornography and all of this, pornography that's happening in homes, persons viewing pornography and children being exposed to it is
Mm-hmm.
also, something that falls within this category.
Okay.
That is an area that needs to be addressed.
To
So
be addressed. So
that's a
where
significant area of concern.
Yeah. So for me now, I'm kind of, why, whether it's domestic violence, sexual harassment, bullying, rape, why is the tendency in our community seem to be hostile towards the victim and not the perpetrator? Where did it come from?
That's a good question.
Because
That's
sometimes it's
something
like if
that
you
I
don't get
struggle
to the
with a
roots
lot.
of it, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I struggle with that a lot because I see it. We've had parents whose daughters were raped and little children, and the parents are like, we don't want it reported to the police because they're going to stigmatize our child,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and people are going to start saying things about my child. Literally, instead of them looking for justice, they want help for the child, but they don't want to attack who molested their child or who
Yeah.
raped their child.
Yeah.
And another part of it is that, and I'm gonna step out on a limb and say this, that a lot of us as Caribbean women have been so sexualized
Hmm.
that it's like it's in some people's minds because of how they look at women. And I say this all the time, that women in the Caribbean, a lot of us have this second class citizenship kind of thing,
Hmm.
where we're not equal in all minds to men. So it's like you have to be sexual to attract men.
To get
And you
attention.
have, so when something happens to a young girl, they
Hmm.
automatically blame the young girl because they feel that she has been too sexual.
Words,
Yeah.
yeah.
But we
Yeah.
teach them from young to be sexual.
Yeah.
If you look at how they dance, if you look at
Hmm.
how the women dance for carnival, who are they're gonna emulate? They look at television. They're
Hmm.
looking at these shows on BET and all these other shows that where the women are extremely sexual.
Hmm.
So if you're putting all these sexual images in their faces, and you're even the songs nowadays are sexual
Yeah.
again. So here you are telling young girls that to be a woman and to be accepted as a woman, you have to be sexual.
Yeah.
And then when they are sexual, you say, okay, that's why you got raped, or that's why
Yeah.
that happened to you, because you were asking for it with your behavior. So
Hmm.
we as adults also are giving our children these
Wrong messages.
totally negative images.
Yeah.
And then when we give them the negative images and they act out on it and something happens, then
Hmm.
it's still their fault.
Yeah.
Nobody says, that poor girl, I'm so sorry that happened to her. Oh, that
Hmm.
girl was this and this girl was that. And you hear that
Hmm.
all the
All
time.
the
So
time. Yeah.
parents now, when things happen to their kids, they hide it. They don't want anybody to know. They don't want to go to the police
Hmm.
because my child is going to get stigmatized again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if
You know,
June
and
wants to add.
well, Dr. Samuel, I'll let you chime in there because I know share the thought that just came to mind. Listening to what Maris was saying in terms of what parents' response tends to be.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with her. That is, we have to look at how we're socializing our girls, how we're socializing our boys to see the girls,
Hmm.
um, how we socialize our young people around. boundaries and having boundaries, um, respect. As Mary said, a lot of the music, sometimes we objectify women.
Yeah.
Men are
Mhm.
just objects. We refer to their body parts in different types of languages.
Mhm.
So there's just all of these factors that I think play into, behaviors between women and men. And some of the behaviors result, lead to, it's almost nothing. Sometimes when you listen to the stories, you know, um,
Mhm.
of girls being inducted into, sexual favors at such early ages, and you by
Mhm.
adult men, and you just have to start to think about, like, okay, where is this really coming from?
Coming
How
from,
is it
yeah,
that you can consider this to be even appropriate
appropriate.
or
Yeah.
normal? Um, so that we need to have more open conversations about these kinds of behaviors. I think we need to place more pressure on holding adults accountable for their behaviors.
Mhm.
We need to place more pressure on adults, making sure that we protect our children in all spaces and places, wherever they may be. Children should be protected and allowed to be children,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's a lot of work within our communities that we still have to do around this area. And
Yeah.
sometimes we may not even be aware of the messages that we're sending, when we say certain things in certain public spaces,
Yeah.
and we are not really connecting the dots in terms of how this is going to um, fall out in terms of behaviors that persons will engage in.
Yeah. Yeah, I find a lot of it is normalized. In looking at, I guess, how the society has evolved over time. There was a time when, older men marrying younger women because, education system would have been different, and it was more so about you're raising your girls to be basically a wife and a mother, and that's it. you
Yes.
know.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a double standard, I would say, that I think is still carrying on. That sometimes you really have to fight
Mhm.
against, in terms of, again, your women are just as important as the men, and should be respected as such. Because if somebody shot your child, you would be up in arms marching the street. So, it sends a
Yeah.
message when I hear about parents saying, they want to shield a child when, they've obviously been violated. They might not have been, I guess we're thinking in terms of, well, physically they
Yeah.
look okay, but we don't understand the psychological
Yep.
damage
Mhm.
that
Yes.
happens, and
Yes.
Very
basically creates
trauma.
a lot of
Yeah.
dysfunctional family dynamics. And they continue it if they don't get help. It basically continues on for another generation and another one, because we know domestic
Yeah.
violence again used to be something in our societies where it was like, oh, that's their business type of thing. And
Yep.
unless
Mhm.
somebody is physically damaged, then we might be offended somewhat, but we still don't, we're not up in arms and saying, hey, this is not acceptable. And I don't think we've drawn that line as yet as a community, and saying that, yeah, you're right, create those safe spaces that, you know someone can come forward, whether it's an adult or a child, and be able to say, yes, I've been violated, and and,
Yes.
and this is not acceptable for us as a community, because it's
Mhm.
violence.
Yeah.
And the psychological violence to me is worse than the physical,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
you could heal from the cuts, but the
Oh
scars
yes.
on your
Mhm.
soul are a whole, different
Yeah. Mhm.
kettle of
Hmm.
fish.
Hmm. And I
Mhm.
think, as you
Yeah.
said, Shayna, it's the helping persons to understand the level of psychological damage that sexual assault, of boys and girls, because boys, it happens with our boys as well,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
that's a whole other area that I don't even think that we
People
are
are aware of, yeah.
ready
Yeah.
or willing to address.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
since we're focusing on women, the psychological damage that sexual assault does, that it carries, and how it plays out in the community over time, is
Yeah.
significant. And I think being able to, find a way of educating our women, um, and educating our different institutions as to what they need to look for. I know Red Cross has a program that they've been trying to put out, so that when we see suspicious behaviors starting
Mhm.
to happen, we will nip it in the bud. But the
Yeah.
other point I wanted to make, though, is, I think one of the things we have to address is the socioeconomic status of women,
Okay.
right? And we women, we've advanced socioeconomically, yes, in the BVI, but we still have women who, um, because of their economic situation,
Mhm.
will find themselves in situations where they're basically being taken advantage of because they're economically dependent on the persons, the males in their life,
Person. Uh-huh.
right? And it then sets up
Mhm.
for these kinds of situations where, that are not healthy
Okay.
for the children within those relationships. So that's something
Mhm.
that we need to look at as well.
Okay. Well, unbelievably, the time has run up on us. So
All
we're
the
gonna
time.
start talking solutions to the issue. But
Great.
I think we really unpacked and put everything out on the
Mhm.
table and said, hey, we really have some concerns here, and some problems really that we need to get to dealing with, and on a consistent basis. Because again, I love the awareness month. I love it, but 1 month out of 12 for something, so for this type of
It's not enough.
is
It's
is
not
is not
enough.
enough.
Yeah.
It's not
Mhm.
enough. So that's one of the things where for me,
No,
sometimes I
it's not.
use my platform just to always keep that kind of conversation going, because the first step, as you guys would tell us, is we have to admit we have a problem. And then
That's the
once
problem.
we've
Mhm.
admitted we have a problem, then we can walk through the steps of actually dealing with how we resolve the issue.
Mhm.
So we talked a lot about the importance of public education. Again, that's definitely a first step. I know one of the things, I don't recall if I've
Mhm.
seen it here. Let's say, for example, with sexual harassment, when I worked in Florida, it was a course that we had to take as an employee at the job, sexual harassment policy, because
Mhm.
there was a policy in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
what's acceptable and what's not.
And what's
And
not?
I don't think there was anything in the labor code. I don't know if you guys are aware of anything as it relates to that.
Not that I'm aware of. Maris, you're
You're
aware of
aware of?
anything? I don't think
Okay.
so.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. So that may
We
be
could,
something
No,
where
I'm
we have
not.
to
I'm
start.
not. I
we
think
could
that's
always
a
get it
great thing that.
that me, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you could get it. There's a whole health and safety section in the labor code,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So
And you're not supposed to discriminate based on
Uh
all
huh.
lot of stuff,
right. So
but
safety in the
specifically,
workplace means I shouldn't be
So
sexually
yes.
harassed or bullied at work.
yeah,
It includes that.
yeah,
But
yeah. I
but
think I think we
Yeah.
need to
We
having
leave
flesh.
the sex at home.
Yeah, we
yeah
have to we have to flesh
having
that out
Yeah. We knew.
and make
having it
sure that's something that's addressed.
explicitly, yeah, having it explicitly named, I think, is
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
we need to look at.
Okay. I know we had some updates to legislation that in the last, I guess, 5 to 10 years as it relates to domestic violence and sexual assault. Do we need anything else there, or is basically about enforcing what we do have?
No.
I think well, Maris could speak to this too, but I think
I
it's
think it's about enforcing what we do have, and
enforcement.
there's some officers.
Hmm. There's a lot. I didn't hear the last part you said. Okay, Maris, no, we're not hearing you at all. Try again.
You're kind of breaking up, June, and
Okay,
now it's
good. We got
stuck.
you back. Yeah, you're back.
Go ahead, Maris. You were
You're not
saying.
hearing me?
We're hearing you
Go
now.
We're hearing you now. Go ahead.
Okay. I wasn't saying anything. I was saying that I wasn't hearing June because she was saying something.
Okay.
But what I was saying is that when you look at the codes and the laws, they're there. The
Yeah.
framework is there. However, in terms of having sometimes having it enforced
Hmm.
or being able to enforce it, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I'm on television live. Excuse me. Um, in terms of having it enforced,
Hmm.
or some officers having the will to enforce it,
Yeah.
is it it,
It's a
it doesn't
challenge.
work the
Yeah.
way it should,
Hmm.
and that's sad. I think that sometimes it's like you're fighting this battle to get certain people to do what they're
Justice.
supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
When domestic violence acts happen, it can depend if you're a friend of this person, if this officer knows you, they call you and they talk to you and they say, don't do this again because you're gonna get a,
Hmm.
and they let them go, and then the whole cycle repeats itself.
Come
And I
happens
think
again.
we have to make it less personal in terms of
Yeah.
friendships.
Hmm.
And I mean, there are officers who don't give a who will arrest you if you do it. But then
Yeah.
there's some who look out for their friendships and who value their relationships with these people. And so sometimes it doesn't work because of that.
Hmm.
But the framework is there to
Yeah.
improve how we respond to domestic violence.
Yeah.
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 I
And
mean,
again.
I think looking at, so as a community, as a society,
Hmm.
how do we get to the place
Mhm.
where we have a zero tolerance to violence
Yeah.
in all
All
forms?
forms. Yeah.
Okay, because
Mhm.
um, violence brings about trauma, and trauma and mental health and physical health, the links between the negative outcomes from trauma and
Hmm.
health,
Yeah.
significant, the evidence is out there.
Mhm.
So we need to be able to push and insist and get our policymakers to adopt a position of zero tolerance to all forms of violence,
Yeah.
and then try to
All
push
right.
it down from there. Because yes, the laws are there, right? But there are lots of, I think, attitudes around these kinds of issues
Yeah.
that need to change. And then if
Hmm.
you don't have the structure and the system support in place to bring about the change, then it
Hmm.
means you have to take a different kind of, you have to kind of almost put that system in place, right? We have a
Mhm.
culture, we develop a culture of zero tolerance, so that
Hmm.
then persons, it doesn't come down to the individual making the decision. It is that
Yeah.
as a society, we're saying no to this. So if there's
Yeah.
domestic violence, if there's sexual assault, if there's rape, we are going to take
Mhm.
some sort of action. I
Hmm.
think the other thing, the other area where we're weak still has to do with intervention programs. Because for persons who are affected,
Hmm.
exposed, they have to be taken, both the perpetrators and the victims. We need
Yeah.
intervention programs on both sides.
Okay.
If we are intending to really, impact this problem,
Yeah.
because for us in the BVI, our greatest resource is our
Yeah.
human resource,
Yeah.
right? And if we have this happening at all, we have to have a way to be able to help people to heal so
Hmm.
that they can remain as functional adults in the community.
Yeah.
So the intervention programs are really, I think, a big area that we need to be looking at.
Okay. And you're right. It really has to be a top down and bottom up approach. Sometimes we hear certain comments being made by persons who we think should be leading the charge. And, I appreciate, yes, people make poor choices, but that doesn't exempt them from having to basically deal with the consequences. Because again, if the victims, they didn't have a choice in the matter.
Exactly.
and then it comes down that,
I
the
just wanted to add
perpetrator
one
the
thing to
perpetrator
that.
is apologized for, as in
Mm,
it was a mistake.
right.
Mistakes are putting salt in your tea instead of sugar. That's a mistake. To get to the place of rape or domestic violence, and then these kind of repetitive behaviors, we have to be so careful about it. Marish, you
Yeah.
want to say something, and then I'm going to ask about something else, and then we
No,
wrap
I
up.
just wanted to say I wanted to add something to that. I think that we have to start educating parents also at from time children are 5 and 6
Mm-hmm.
about violence, because a lot of times it's not just it's what they see at home.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
Marriage dropped out.
Yeah, we lost her. Okay, so hopefully she pops back up. But Doc, I
Yeah.
was going to bring up the recent conversation we've been hearing out there in terms of calls for a sexual offenders registry. Again, I think this is something that was supposed to have been implemented or part of draft legislation, but it wasn't fully implemented as far as I recall. Are you aware of the status of that?
I don't know that any work has been done on that recently. I
Mm-hmm.
stand to be corrected, but I certainly haven't heard of of any forward movement in terms of putting that in place.
Okay.
Because there was discussions about not just a registry, but about monitoring, and putting a whole system in place in terms of of monitoring of sexual offenders.
Okay.
So I also know at one point there was a discussion about an intervention program for sexual offenders,
Okay.
so that if persons were convicted, that they would go through a program. You would have the registry, you would have the monitoring, but I
Mm-hmm.
haven't heard any recent discussions on that.
Okay.
So I don't know that that has moved forward.
That has moved forward. And again, this
Mhm.
this has to be part of our zero tolerance to violence policy.
Exactly. And that's what I talk about. That's what I mean to when I talk about putting systems
Yeah.
in place. You have to
Yeah.
put the whole system in place where
Mm-hmm.
you address both the offenders
Mm-hmm.
and protect them from themselves,
Yeah.
and you put a system in place for the victims,
Yeah.
right? So that they can be rehabilitated, supported in their recovery,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and also protected from future violations.
Yeah.
So we I think in the BVI we have a ways to go as
Yeah.
far as these things go.
Addressing those things.
Hmm.
Maris, we lost you there for a second. I don't know if you remember the thought you were sharing.
Yeah. Yes, you did. I guess I just wanted to say that I think that we need to start education on these things from the time
Yes,
children are like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I know some people are going to say that's,
That's
but
too
you
young.
need to start teaching them about bad touches and good touches. You need to
Mm-hmm.
start teaching parents on how to talk to their children about sexual, abuse and sexual, because it happens. A lot of the women that we see, and even the men, it happened when they were that age. It started at that
yes,
age. And if
Yeah.
we don't start to put that as one of our priorities, education, I think education goes a long way. It has to happen in the churches, because I have pastors who know things happen by men, and who have gone to the court and said
Mm-hmm.
this is a good man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it has to, we have to really vigorously educate
Mm-hmm.
yes,
people on what this does to women, what this does to the victims,
Mm-hmm.
and how the long range effects that it has on these people's lives. This is not
Yeah.
yes,
something that happens and that the victim forgets about it the next week or the next
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
year, or they grow
Yeah,
out of it. They don't grow out of it.
Yeah.
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 The emotional trauma stays with them for years.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think that that if that might be where we need to start,
Yeah.
right? In helping persons
Mhm.
to understand why we're so passionate about it, because
Yeah.
we see
Mhm.
the effect
Yeah.
on women's lives.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
and
result.
as Mary said, you don't grow out of it. They don't, it is there, and
Mhm.
it carries on into their relationship,
Yeah.
their intimate relationships, their relationships with their children. Okay, so this is not something that we really need to be just soft touching at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay,
continue to shroud in secrecy because it's
exactly,
not going
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
get better. We're not going to resolve it by
exactly.
continuing to ignore it or kind of put it on the side, and it's not. And the fact that in terms of even like the stats, like you guys said at the beginning, the reporting, we know, whatever we do know, we probably need to multiply it by 5 to
Yeah.
really
Or
get a
more.
size of the problem. And knowing the
Hmm.
size even of our population, it multiplies out really fast. And would say that
Yes,
we have an issue that needs to be addressed. And the longevity of it, because we might say, well, it just happened in the last 5 years, but it's something really, it has come along from much further back. So
much
we have to
further.
be so
Yes,
careful with these
yeah,
things. All right.
yeah.
Well, first we're gonna close out by allowing you to talk about FSN and as well as you, doctor, in terms of how persons, if they happen to be listening to us today, and they themselves or know of people who need help, how they can get in contact with you guys. So you can go ahead, Maris.
Okay, they can call us at 499. You can't hear me?
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
we
They
hear.
can call us at 4990999, or they can come. Can you hear me now?
Hmm.
Or you can barely hear me? Can you hear
We're
me?
hearing you
Yeah, go
well.
ahead. Go
No, I guess
ahead. Go
not.
ahead.
We're hearing you well.
Okay, I was saying you can call us at 4990999, or you can come by our offices at I think it's Chalwell Street,
Hmm.
Hmm.
upstairs of the salon, right on the road right in front that intersects with Midtown Restaurant and Ice Mart. On
Hmm.
that road, we're on the last building before you get to Midtown
To make
Restaurant
street.
upstairs.
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
come, knock on the door, and someone will come in and see you. If you need help, that's what we're there for. We're there from 9 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon.
Okay. So, and the number that you gave out, is that a 24-hour hotline or do you have a hotline?
Yes, it is. That's not the
Yes.
24-hour hotline number.
Okay. Awesome.
If
Great.
you need shelter, if you need to get away, we have, sometimes you can't go back home after the trauma has happened. You can't go back home after you've been hit. We do provide emergency shelter, and we
Hmm.
have a really decent program now. Before, you had to go back home in 3 days. Now you can be out for
Okay.
a month or two. So
Okay.
and
That's
give
awesome.
yourself time and that person time to get
Yeah. To
assistance
get
that
it
they need.
resolved. Okay. Awesome. Dr.
Yeah.
Samuel?
So I offer at my office. We do counseling, and evaluation and counseling both for the individual and the family. So you can contact us at Five Doctors Medical. It is 345-1591 or 494-1317.
Okay.
I think the other thing, for Maris and FSN, they also help with protection orders and dealing with the court system. So there are supports out here that we can offer for you at either end, whether it's the beginning, whether it is you need someplace safe to go to, or whether you've managed to come out of the situation but you need ongoing help and support in terms of
Mm,
counseling. So don't try to reach out, do reach out, and we will try to guide you in the
yeah.
best way that we can.
Okay. All right, ladies. Well, on behalf of our community, I want to just thank you for all the awesome work that you have been doing behind the scenes. Because again, oftentimes people don't know the half. But when you get
Mhm.
called out your house, because somebody's life is basically on the line. So, and I know you guys have been doing
Mhm.
this for quite some time because again, you love what you do, you love helping people. So
Mhm.
we're gonna see if we can find some more soldiers to take up the
Yeah.
cause with us because again, it's really yeah, we have to make this a human rights issue. I think for it to really start to gain the traction that it needs because where we are as a society, it's kind of we need a shock to the system, and as we said, violence of any kind, shape, or form is unacceptable. And
Yes.
for us to have healthy functional families, we have to make sure that we're giving everybody the tools they need. So whether it's the children, we start to talk to them from the early age, as Mary said, up to the teens and the adults, because again, as they go out into the world, they're exposed to so much more now than
Mhm.
what I might have been exposed to when I was a teenager, and
Right.
have to navigate now. What I exposed to as an adult, they already have to deal with even at preteen. So that's to tell you how
Right.
much the society has changed because there's so much different influences
Mhm.
now
Yeah.
that are coming in. But it is something that we definitely have to get our hands around essentially, and wrestle it to the ground and make
Yes.
sure that we are protecting our boys or girls or men or women because we want to see the best for everybody. So that's the key
Absolutely.
thing. That's the key thing.
Yes.
So I thank you again for being here. I will bring you back because again, we don't just do months of awareness, but we're gonna get those stats, Dr. Samuel, and make sure again we make people aware of the scope of the problem and
Mhm.
get feedback in terms of what we need to be doing as a community to resolve this and make things
Absolutely.
happen for us all. So again, close out on words of encouragement. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. You have been tuned in to the Vigilante Dialogues this evening. I have been joined by my guests, Dr. Maris Hodgwright, Dr. June Samuel, and we have been talking about the importance, I hope people take away, the importance of healthy relationships and
Mhm.
what we need to do to make sure that we have a healthy society. So I am your host, Shayna Smith Archer, saying let's continue to change the conversation for a better Virgin Islands.
Thanks for having us, Shayna.
Thank you.